Welcome back to House Rich, the real estate show, home of the world's best home buying tips. So today we're going to talk about the viral article where it's talking about you need to make $160,000 to live in Manhattan, or you need to make 40x times the rent. Why that kind of makes sense, and how that relates to you buying a house. We're going to actually get into those numbers because honestly, if you understand how the numbers work, it actually makes perfect sense to a bit. Perfect. Per air quotes for the perfect, not air quotes for sense. So let's break it down. So that's 40 times the rent per year. And so let's do a little bit quick math. There's 12 months in a year. 3 times 12 is 36. So it's essentially 3 times the monthly rent and change. And so you probably heard 3 times the monthly rent in the city that you live in. So it's not really all that different. It's just written different. Like I guess in New York they just write it 40 times the rent per year. Most of it just says 3 times a month the rent. So it's the exact same thing most likely in your city to begin with. And so let's talk about the $160,000 a year. Let's divide that 160 by 40 and it comes out to $4,000 a month. So it comes basically out to $4,000 in rent. And I guess that's what it costs to rent in Manhattan. So what does something cost? What is something worth? Something is worth what somebody's willing to pay for. And so the market says that folks are willing to pay $4,000 a month to rent in Manhattan. So there you go. There goes the price for rent in Manhattan. That just is what it is. So whether you're saying the price is too high or whatever, that's a whole different story. But that's just how the numbers work out. And so let's get to this 3 times the rent thing, because I think that's really where people start to trip up and it's like, why do I got to do that? Actually, before we get there, let's talk about the rent in Manhattan or whatever city you're living in. Yes, it's expensive to live in Manhattan. No, it's your downtown. It's more convenient. You're near a lot of stuff. It's fun to live downtown, especially in your early 20s. But if you can't afford to, don't do it. I'll give you a perfect example. So like when I lived in the DC area. I didn't actually live in DC. I lived in Rockville, Maryland, which was outside of DC. When I was in Memphis, so Memphis is a great example. So I moved to Memphis. I remember when I got there, I drove there from DC to Memphis, stayed in the hotel till I found a place, and it took me like 3 or 4 days. But I remember looking at the first apartment because I was like, let me find the cheapest apartment. Let me just Google it. It was $480. The first apartment I looked at, and so yeah, it was $480. And so I remember looking in that area, and I was like, I'm kind of young. Maybe I can deal with the elements. I'll just say that. But I was like, okay, let me check out some other apartments. I remember I found another one. It was like I think it was like $635, something like that. And then there was another apartment. It was $1,200. I think it was like a condo that was for rent. It'd been nicely refurbished. I mean, it was a nice looking place. Because I mean, $1,200. This is like 2011, 2012 maybe, in Memphis. So think about that, $1,200 10 years ago. It was a pretty nice place. But I was like, okay, this looks cool. But I guess it's cool to have marble countertops. And so to me, I'd eliminate the 481. There's a little too much amongst the elements. And so I was like, okay, $675. It ain't the nicest place. It's got the linoleum, I think you know what I'm trying to say. Countertops, just the basic floors with the laminate on the floors. But it was just like it was a corner unit, so it was cool. It had a little balcony, and it backed up against the tree line. So I was like, oh, this is perfect for me. I can kind of get things done in this unit right here. And so that's what I did in my scenario. And so I didn't need to live in Memphis. It was a nice area. Oh, I'll tell you, the last place I looked at in Memphis was like $2,000 a month looking over the Mississippi. It was super nice. It was a condo. It was 2 stories. But like I said, what was that really going to do for me now? Like looking back 10 years ago, I'm glad I didn't buy the $2,000 or rent the $2,000 a month apartment. Sorry, that was a little bit more of a tangent. But you don't have to live in the most expensive place. Just remember that you can actually stay down for a year or two until you actually come up, and then you can actually afford to live in the city. But back to the numbers. All right, so let's break this down when it comes to the housing market. So it works almost exactly the same as far as your DTI when you're buying a house. But once again, your apartment is not doing a DTI calculation. So let's say you make $4,000 a month. If you're pretty much the highest your debt to income ratio can go is 50%, meaning that your monthly living expense can be no more than twice your income. So if you make $4,000 a month, your monthly mortgage payment can be no more than $2,000, so 2x. But that's assuming you have absolutely zero debt. So let's say you have, I don't know, a car payment that's $500, some credit cards, some student loans, and all this, and your monthly debts are $1,000. So once again, your debt income ratio can only be 50% of your income. So if we take the $2,000 living expense, tack on the $1,000 in monthly finance debts, that means that you need to make at least $6,000 in order to qualify for this $2,000 home. So once again, 2,000 plus 1,000 equals 3,000, divided by 6,000 equals a 50% debt to income ratio. So 2,000 times 3 equals 6,000. So in that very likely scenario, that's 3 times, you have to make basically 3 times the mortgage. So it's almost exactly the same thing as when it comes to buying a house. It's just, once again, your apartment is not going to go through the whole process of breaking down your deed side and all that, just because that's not what they do. And so let's break down how you calculate your DTI for folks that are new to the podcast or the I guess the YouTube channel. Your debt to income ratio is your monthly finance debt. So, and it's the minimum payments for it. So like if you have a credit card, I don't know if your balance is $4,000. If your minimum payment is only, I don't know, $150, whether you make the minimum or the maximum or you pay more, the lender is counting $150 towards your debt to income ratio. So that's something like a car payment. It's your car payment, student loans, whatever your student loan payment is. I have a whole episode about student loans, how those payments are actually calculated if you're in deferment and all that. But it's basically your monthly finance debts plus the future mortgage payment divided by your income before taxes. So, like I said, it's almost the exact same formula for when you buy a house. And so that's why I always kind of tell folks, like, when you're thinking about going from an apartment to a home, always work backwards to find what that price is. Because it's typically like, if you're comfortable in that apartment, it's typically the same thing. It's simply the same living expense you want when you move to a house. So like I said, if you are, paying $2,000 a month in rent, you need to work your way backwards to figure out what a home that's priced at $2,000 equates to on the market. Don't say, hey, I want a $400,000 house, and then just figure out what the monthly payment is after the fact. Because what's going to happen is you're going to fall in love with that $400,000 house, that $400,000 neighborhood, and then it may be, this is going to vary based on your state, but it may be $3,000 a month. And now you've talked yourself into a scenario where your debt to income ratio is way out of whack, and it just kind of throws off things. So once again, always find out what you're comfortable with as far as your living expense, and then work your way backwards to figure out how to get there. And so, yeah, that's really it. So I just wanted to comment on that article. If you got any questions, let me know. And please, review the podcast. I really appreciate that. Like here on YouTube, share with a friend, subscribe. But leave a review on the podcast. I would really, really, really appreciate it. Thanks.